Hi there, I'm Christine Weber. I love to support mature yoga teachers and getting their wisdom out there to the world. So thank you so much for being here. This is my weekly live stream. I'm usually here at 11 on Wednesdays, Eastern, that is. Feel free to leave comments and questions, like other topics you'd like me to talk about. I'm always paying attention to that and happy to add that to my list of things I'd like to share. I usually just kind of share stuff that's relevant in terms of the yoga tradition, what's going on in my life, and also, kind of what's going on in the world, and things like that, and tips for doing practices and stuff. So today, I am in the middle of a big move. Here, I'm going to show you. We're moving house. This is what my basement looks like right now. And actually, the rest of my house looks like that too. The only place it doesn't look like that is my little studio right here. So, um, and it will soon. It's gonna after I do this live stream, we're gonna actually break it down because we're moving on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, the movers are coming, and we're moving into a new house, and I'm really excited about it. I'm like happy to be moving, and I have a nice view, and it's a much brighter house. And one of the reasons I wanted to move is like this is a townhouse, and so we don't have it doesn't have a lot of light, and that's important to me as someone who spends a lot of time in my office and writing, and I'm working on an article for a medical journal right now. Like I do a lot of research and stuff, and it's I just need a place where I can feel the sun on me and feel some brightness. So anyway, we decided to move, and I'm really excited about it, but it's also that every time we've moved, it's like there's some heaviness, and some sadness about it. And I wanted to talk about that today in terms of Aparigraha. So, um, Aparigraha is the fifth of the yamas, and it means something like letting go. People will say non-hoarding, not holding on to. I also like the idea of sustainability because a paragraha, I think, has a lot to do with living a life that's sustainable and not um, over consuming, if you like, in this very over consumed kind of culture. We are so encouraged to consume in our culture. And so a paragraha actually gives us the idea that when you don't overconsume, that's one of the ways that we help to still the mind. We help to find greater contentment, and it's also considered a moral or ethical principle of not over consuming. So as we've been packing up the house, excuse me, and this is the fourth time we've moved in 5 years, by the way. And as we've been packing up the house, I've been having these messages of a parigraha. So the first time we moved, by the way, 5 years ago, we just moved into a slightly bigger house because we had lived in a really tiny box for a long time, and it was possible at that point for us to move into a bigger house. So we did. And then about a year later, we got it was a little more, it was about a year later, COVID came. And so we decided to pack up and move to New Zealand because that's where my husband's from. And we thought, okay, New Zealand isn't being affected by by the pandemic. So let's go. And I was the best. I was so happy there. But it wasn't working out in terms of work, and just our roots were so much deeper here than we really thought. So we really needed to come back. So we came back after about 6 months. So that was move number three. And then we lived in this house. We've lived in this house for 2.5 years. And about a year ago, I said to my husband, like, I need to move. I don't want to, I'm not happy here. I want more light. I need, the space was fine. We have a lot of space here, but I needed more light. And so we looked and we couldn't find a house. And then we finally found a piece of land. And our dear friend, who we've known for 25 years, is a builder who owned the land. He's like, I'll build you a house. So it was kind of perfect. It was like this perfect kind of situation. And it's been a wonderful experience actually working with him. So we have this, oops, sorry about that. I thought I turned my ringer off. Anyway, so we have this this fourth move coming up next week. And every time we've moved, the reason I told you about those previous moves is every time we've moved, it's been a purge. Even moving back from New Zealand, I was like, I've only been here for 6 months, and I accumulated a bunch of stuff that I had to get rid of. The first move, of course, was the biggest one. But now we've accumulated a lot of stuff in 2.5 years. Partly, it was that we moved into this house. This house was owned by a friend of a friend, and they were older people that were moving into a nursing facility. And so they were like, "We don't need this, you can have it." And they gave us all this stuff, and we were like, "Okay," like a piano and things like that. So we've got a lot of things of theirs that we're also getting rid of. And most of it I feel fine with, but my my husband came up to me this morning. He was holding 5 of those, 9 by 13 Pyrex, baking dishes. He had 5 of them in his hand, and he was like, "Really?" He's like, "We need 5 of these?" And I was like, "I didn't buy them because I inherited some of them from the people who lived here before." So so I was like, "Yes, I need 5 baking, what if one of them breaks?" And I realized I kinda started laughing while I was saying it because I realized I do that about everything. I'm like, "What if I need this notebook that I've never used in 15 years? What if I need this?" Oh, my grandmother's rocking chair, which I've had for 20 years sitting in a basement, and it needs to be fixed, and I've just never fixed it. Like, I need to let go. And and that process of letting go it can be really, you can feel a lot of grief. It can be grieving to let go, just not only to like let go of things, but also the place, like to let go of this house, which is a thing. But I mean, it's more like the memories that are in the house. And then I was thinking back on it, and I realized every time we've moved, I've felt I needed to cry. You know, every time we've moved in the past 5 years, I just had to get it out because there is a sense of grief and a sense of loss, and it's okay to feel that. It's so human and normal to feel that. And then I turn to the tradition. What does the tradition offer? So, yeah, let go of stuff and don't look back. Like, move forward on your path, and you don't have to look back to what was, and think like, "Oh, I was so happy here when my son was little." Not here, but my previous house. I was so happy. My son was little. We were so happy. This happy little family. We were so young. We were so free. Those sort of things that come up. You know what I'm talking about, right? Those kind of messages that bubble up, and you're like, "Oh, at that time it was so fun." Well, the reality is it wasn't perfect. It wasn't the best. It wasn't better than now. It was one thing that happened in your life, and good, you had some good times, you had some bad times, but it's just life. It's not that it, and making it like it was better back then is really problematic, because it's a thing that holds you back. It doesn't keep you from moving forward into what's next, because there's always a next step. We watched a movie the other night. My husband and I always talk about the movies we watch, but the other night we were watching 3 Days of the Condor. Remember, with Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway? You remember that movie? I think it came out in like 1976 or something, um, or 75. I don't know. In the mid 70s, it came out. So my husband and I saw that it was on. I think it was on Amazon Prime. We saw it was there. We were like, "Let's watch this movie." And I was like, "Yeah, I remember that was a really good movie." And he was like, "Yeah, I remember that was a really good movie." It was fascinating to watch a movie that's 50 years old and to sort of think about it from the perspective of where you are now compared to where you are then. So I would have been a pretty young person back then when that movie came out. And I remember at the time thinking like, "Oh, it's a great espionage movie, and Robert Redford's so cute, and look at all the good scenery around New York City and Washington, DC." Well, watching it now, first of all, it's so offensive to women. I mean, he abducts her, and then he basically rapes her, even though it's sort of put off as like they kind of fall in love, sort of. And then she makes a crack about it, like that they had sex, and then he gets really upset, and she apologizes to him. It's just like, oh my god, that would never go over now. So the first thing, like, my feminist sensibility came in, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that anybody ever thought that was a good movie, because it's so deeply offensive to women. The women are just sort of throwaway characters in that film that are only there to support Robert Redford's, like, difficult situation. Well, meanwhile, he's harming them. And then the second thing about that movie that really was interesting to me was to look at all the local color, like all the cars and the streets and the clothes and the way shops looked and stuff. And in my mind, I had this like, oh, the 70s, it was such a great time, And I was thinking about that before we watched the film, such a great time. And it was so simple and there was no internet. You know, and then to see the how, like, dingy it was actually, and then to also see things like how the computers were just, like, so clunky and awful, like, they're an espionage movie with all these old clunky computers, and I get upset sometimes at technology and, like, "Oh, it's so frustrating, and there's so much of it, and everything's online, and I miss the simpler times," and all of that's okay, but technology has radically simplified my life, radically expanded my capacity to reach people like I'm doing right now. I mean, it's so different than it was 50 years ago, and in many ways, there's problems, of course, but in many ways, it's better. So we kind of have this tendency as human beings to, the grass is greener, like to remember the past with nostalgia, and maybe that's not the best thing to do. Maybe it's not the happiest thing to do. Maybe it's not the thing that fills us with the most happiness and contentment. Maybe it's another hindrance in the path, you know. And so what is that path? In the yoga tradition says that path is continually realizing or more and more or deepening the capacity to realize who we truly are and that part of ourselves that doesn't change, because that's what's going to remain. So all of my stuff, gotta let it go. Even the people in our lives, we have to go. We have to let go of the places in our lives, um, and to be able to do that in a way that doesn't just crush us, under the crushing reality of what is going to happen, that inevitable journey to the ocean of oneness, right? To be able to get through that, human beings have always used spirituality to help them connect to something greater than themselves. And that something greater than ourselves also, the bhakti yogas would say when that something greater than ourselves makes us feel held and nurtured and loved and supported as we go through the veils of um, liberation, then we can get through it more easily. The veils of realization, we can get through it more easily, right? Every time those veils get ripped off, it's like a band-aid getting ripped off. It's ouch. Here goes a house. Ouch. Here goes my car. Ouch. Here goes my pet. Here goes a parent or someone I love, and those there it's painful, and so not having something that we can feel like we can hold on to is very difficult. And we end up doing things. We compartmentalize, we put up walls, we psychologically block things off so that we won't feel it. And the greatest gift, I think, is to be able to feel it and to be able to experience it and still know that you're held, and there's something that holds you in your grief. There's something that supports you in your grief. And so yeah, I think those are the two things that happen on that goal. The one is the layers peel away, the veils of illusion, start the band-aids of illusion start to get ripped off, and as they get ripped off, if we don't feel like there's something that holds us and something that loves us unconditionally, infinitely, expansively, then I think it's very difficult. I think the process is very difficult. So those are some of my thoughts today. This is the last live stream I'm going to be doing from this space. Next week, hopefully, fingers crossed, if everything goes as planned, I will be in our new space, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you from there. So please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts about this topic. I would love to hear, and also any other topics, yoga topics you want me to check in about. And I'll see you next week. Lots of love.